The scent of mesquite smoke drifted lazily over the cul-de-sac, mingling with the crisp scent of fall leaves. My grill was fired up, steak sizzling, hot dogs charring just the way my nephews like them, and a full tray of ribs slow cooking on the side. It was more than just a backyard barbecue, it was a tradition. Every October, I hosted a fire safety cookout for the local volunteer fire department, my way of giving back. After 20 years of service, most of them in flame-retardant gear, I still felt the call to serve, just in a different uniform now. Apron, tongs in hand, retired but not removed. But that day, everything changed. I saw her from the corner of my eye. Linda, HOA president. 62, bobbed silver hair sprayed into perfection, manicured fingers clutching her clipboard like a sword. She didn't walk, she marched, like she was leading a parade of bad decisions. She stopped at the edge of my yard, heels planted in the grass like she owned the earth beneath them, nose wrinkled as if smoke itself was a personal affront to her supremacy. You are in violation of Section 8.3 no outdoor cooking devices within view of the street. She barked, eyes darting to my grill like it had personally insulted her grandmother. I wiped my hands on my apron, walked up calmly, and said, "Linda, it's a fire department drill and charity event. We've been doing this for years." She snapped a photo. "That's not my concern." "This isn't a campground," she sneered. "The board wasn't informed, and this constitutes an unauthorized gathering. I'll be filing a citation. Consider yourself warned." 10 minutes later, sirens. Red and blue lights bounced off the picket fences and trimmed hedges. But instead of bringing shame or submission, they brought applause from my backyard. The officers got out of their cruiser, slightly confused until they saw who was manning the grills. 2 uniformed battalion chiefs and a dozen recruits, all laughing around fire safety pamphlets and open flame. The lead officer looked at Linda and said, "Ma'am, you called us about a fire hazard? That's the actual fire department." She went pale. I went inside and grabbed my phone, not to call for help, but to hit record. Because what Linda didn't know, what she never even asked, was that this wasn't just a barbecue. It was a sanctioned training event, registered with the county. The same county where I served as deputy chief for 17 years. And thanks to a little-known mutual aid clause in our community charter, HOA interference in official public safety operations was a felony. And that phone? It caught every word. She said, "On my lawn, against an active fire training." You think she backed off after that? No, that was only the beginning. She tried to find me, blackmail me, and turn the entire neighborhood against me. But what she didn't count on was my network, my past, or the documents I kept. Every email, every recorded meeting, every contradiction in her claims. What she did was declare war. What I did was prepare for it. Comment below where you're watching from, because these HOA nightmares happen everywhere, and what happened next will absolutely blow your mind and prove that justice can prevail, even against the most powerful bullies. My name is Brennan. I am 54 years old, retired deputy fire chief, and a proud homeowner in Brookridge Estates, at least to be proud. Back when I first moved here, it was peaceful, friendly, almost like one of those neighborhoods you see in an old TV commercial. Lawn sprinklers, kids on bikes, cookouts on weekends. My wife, Andrea, and I picked this house 23 years ago because of the wide-open yard. I still remember how she smiled when we stood under that old oak tree in the back corner. She called it our forever tree. We planted flowers. They're together every spring. After she passed 3 years ago, that yard became my sanctuary. That grill? It was the last birthday gift Andrea ever gave me. I still remember her teasing me about it. "If I get you this thing, Mark, I better see you cooking with it more than twice a year." It's built into a custom stone base I laid myself, and we used to cook together there every Sunday evening. Now, every time I light it, I feel like she's beside me again. The memories tied to that space aren't just emotional, they're sacred. That's why I host the BBQ training drills right there. They're not only for safety outreach, they're in her memory. But this wasn't just about a grill. Before the HOA mess started, my backyard was known around the neighborhood as Firehouse 2. Local kids would come by to get stickers and fire hats. Their parents would ask me to check smoke detectors or explain fire extinguisher rules. My yard had become a little piece of community service, the kind that doesn't come from government grants or city budgets, but from heart, sweat, and a deep sense of duty. I might be retired, but once you've run into a burning house with people depending on you, that sense of responsibility never goes away. That's why, after Andrea passed, I didn't spiral. I built something. Every season, I improved the yard, cleaned up the old shed, turned it into a training storage space, got a few local recruits involved in volunteer work. One of them, Jake, a 23-year-old who nearly flunked out of the academy, told me if it weren't for these backyard drills, he'd have quit firefighting. Now he's a full-time firefighter, third shift, Station 14. My yard isn't just grass and stone. It's where grief turned into purpose. Brookridge Estates wasn't perfect, but for a long time, the HOA kept its distance. We had a president named Ron, a Vietnam vet with more sense than bluster. He understood people needed space, especially someone like me. But when Ron moved to Florida and Linda took over the HOA presidency, everything started to change. And not in subtle ways. At first, it was small things. A note about my mailbox being too rustic. A warning about the size of my American flag. She claimed it exceeded the HOA's dimensions by 4 inches. 4. I ignored most of it, assuming it was just someone trying to prove themselves in a new role. I'd seen that kind of ego before, plenty of rookies come in puffed up, needing to feel powerful before they've earned any respect. Then came the newsletter. Community uniformity is key. A reminder to all residents to maintain order and visual consistency. It included a blurry photo of my backyard with my grill circled in red ink. She didn't even speak to me directly. Still, I stayed calm. I wrote a letter. I explained that the grill was permanent and built within code. I offered to meet. She never responded. Instead, I got a formal violation notice in the mail a week later. That's when I started digging. That's when I began saving every piece of paper, recording every interaction, and setting up discrete cameras on my property. It wasn't just paranoia, it was preparation. Because I knew how these things worked. Bullies test boundaries. And if you flinch once, they never stop pushing. People like Linda weren't about rules. They were about control. And what hurt the most was how she targeted the very thing that brought me peace. Andrea's grill, our yard. The symbol of all the healing I'd done. She wanted it gone because she couldn't control it. Because it wasn't hers. The neighborhood, once filled with kids and community, started feeling colder, tighter. I noticed fewer parents stopping by with their kids. Some stopped waving altogether. I wasn't sure at first. Was I imagining it? Was I just being sensitive because of the grief? But then Jake pulled me aside and said, "Chief, I heard from a neighbor that Linda's telling people your cookouts are illegal, that you're operating an unlicensed event." That's when I knew. It wasn't just about my grill, it was about erasing me. She wanted me quiet, out of sight, off my property. And if she had to shame me out of the neighborhood I'd helped keep safe for decades, she'd do it. But she had no idea who she was dealing with. Because when someone threatens your home, your history, and the memory of the only woman you ever loved, there are only 2 choices. You let it break you, or you fight with everything you've got. And I wasn't about to break. Not for her. Not for anyone. Not when I still had the fire in me. Her name was Linda Cranston. 62, freshly retired from some middle management position in an insurance company, where if I had to guess, she probably ruled over a cubicle farm with the same iron clipboard she now used to terrorize my neighborhood. She walked like someone who thought the ground should be grateful to touch her shoes. Platinum hair too stiff to move in the wind. Lipstick the color of dried cherries. Cardigans in pastel colors, always matched with slacks pressed so tightly they looked factory sealed. And that clipboard, always in hand, always full of violations, and typed HOA memos that no one ever remembered voting on. The first time I really had to deal with her was 2 months before the BBQ incident. I was laying out some mulch near the side yard when she strolled up like she owned the land under my boots. "Mr. Brennan," she said, adjusting her glasses with one bony finger. "Just a friendly reminder. Section 4.1 states that exterior landscaping modifications must be approved by the HOA Architectural Review Committee." I looked at the 2 bags of brown mulch and the tiny shovel in my hand. "This is for the flower bed. Same one I've had here for 20 years. She gave me a tight-lipped smile that could have frozen fire. "Yes, well, I reviewed the original plot approval. There's no record of a flower bed being submitted in 1999. Technically, it's unauthorized." I wiped the sweat off my forehead and stared at her. Double quotes, "Linda, are you really going to fine me for planting marigolds? Regulations exist for a reason, Mr. Brennan, and I do hope you'll comply without further escalation." That was her whole deal, petty power. The kind of person who mistakes micromanagement for leadership. She didn't care about community. She cared about control. And the more she pushed, the more obvious it became that this wasn't about aesthetics or rules. It was about asserting dominance. Things only escalated from there. 2 weeks later, I received a violation notice in my mailbox. In bold, red print, "Notice of known compliance, unauthorized structure, grill station." It included a grainy photo of my grill taken from the sidewalk, clearly zoomed in with a phone camera, likely when I wasn't even home. The letter claimed I had 14 days to dismantle and remove all non-compliant cooking structures visible from public pathways. Failure to comply would result in a $250 per day fine. I sent back a notarized letter with photos showing that the grill was a permanent fixture, built on a stone foundation, fully within setback requirements, and approved by the county building inspector 12 years ago. Her response? Another violation notice, this time for excessive smoke and nuisance odor. Now let me make this clear. I'm not some reckless neighbor lighting bonfires every night. I grill responsibly. I use a smoke box on low heat. I've been in enough burning buildings to know how to manage a fire without bothering anyone. But Linda didn't care. She was building a paper trail, one absurd complaint at a time. Each letter came with more legal-sounding threats: board escalation, lien eligibility, board disciplinary hearing. And every one of them arrived on thick paper with the HOA letterhead and her signature at the bottom, like she was issuing royal decrees. The worst part? She didn't operate alone. Linda had her circle. 4 other board members, all equally power drunk. They followed her lead like ducks in a row. Barry, the treasurer, once filed a complaint against a neighbor for using the wrong shade of green on their garden hose. Karen, yes, her real name, once walked down a driveway with a tape measure to confirm a political sign was too close to the sidewalk. They didn't enforce rules. They hunted for excuses. So I tried diplomacy. I requested an in-person meeting. I brought my documentation, blueprints, receipts, permits. I even offered to plant a few shrubs to obscure the grill from the street view out of courtesy, not obligation. Linda sat at the end of a long folding table in the HOA meeting room with her arms crossed, glasses low on her nose. Compromise, I said, is how communities stay whole. Her reply? Mr. Brennan, this community thrives on order. Exceptions, no matter how noble, are the first cracks in the foundation. I'm afraid we can't allow sentimentality to override our guidelines. Sentimentality, that was the word she used to dismiss my memories. My marriage, my history on that land. But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I watched her closely because in her eyes, I saw something more than a power trip. I saw ambition, plan. And when she leaned back and whispered to Barry while handing him my file, then gave a half smile like she just checked a box, I knew this was personal. She wasn't just enforcing rules. She was targeting me. That's when I noticed the tiny pinhole camera mounted under the community center's wall clock. New, sleek, discreet. And something about the way Linda spoke, measured, formal, with emphasis on certain phrases, made me realize she was rehearsing. This wasn't a confrontation. It was a performance. She was building her case. She was setting a trap. But she wasn't the only one collecting evidence, because that meeting, I recorded the whole thing on my phone from my shirt pocket. And that was just the beginning, she thought. She was the only one playing chess. But I wasn't a pawn. I was waiting for my move. After that meeting, the storm hit full force. It was like living under a dark cloud that followed me everywhere. Linda Cranston didn't just want to control my backyard. She wanted to break me completely. And she used every dirty trick in the HOA handbook, and some that weren't even in the handbook. The first act of harassment was subtle but cruel. One morning, I stepped outside to find the flowers I'd planted beneath the forever tree, uprooted and tossed into the gutter. The soil was torn, petals crushed. I knew who had done it because no storm had hit overnight, and the flowers had been healthy the day before. My neighbors, though afraid to speak openly, started avoiding eye contact. Then the vandalism escalated. The stone base of my grill was scratched with nasty graffiti words like LIAR and fraud scrawled in black spray paint. It wasn't just vandalism, it was a message, a threat. I reported it to the police, but the officer said it was probably a neighbor dispute. No arrests were made. Meanwhile, Linda sent me a notice accusing me of failing to maintain property aesthetics and threatening a $500 fine for damage caused by neglect. It was pure hypocrisy. That was only the beginning. Next came the legal pressure. Out of nowhere, I was served papers for a frivolous lawsuit. The HOA claimed my unauthorized grill structure was a fire hazard and demanded I pay tens of thousands of dollars in damages and legal fees. The complaint included false allegations that my cooking smoke violated local air quality standards and endangered children playing nearby. I was stunned that where was this coming from? I hired a lawyer, and together we uncovered a disturbing pattern. Linda and the board had enlisted a private law firm that specialized in crushing homeowners who dared defy them. They weren't just enforcing HOA rules. They were weaponizing the legal system, and they didn't stop at me. Suddenly, false complaints started flooding city departments. The health inspector came knocking, citing my property for improper waste disposal, which was laughable because I'm meticulous about cleanliness. The water company accused me of illegal connections to the municipal supply, causing service interruptions. Even the fire marshal visited, apparently tipped off about a potential hazard. All baseless, but each complaint delayed repairs or caused additional fines. My reputation took hits too. Linda whispered poison into the ears of neighbors, spreading rumors that I was hiding criminal activity on my property. Someone posted a doctored video on the community forum, showing me supposedly yelling at children, a complete fabrication. Business contacts who once supported my volunteer projects suddenly distanced themselves. I was isolated. The physical intimidation began next. One night, I found a van parked suspiciously near my driveway. The license plate was unfamiliar, but the driver's eyes locked onto me through the window. When I called the police, they couldn't prove anything. But it was clear I was being watched. Surveillance cameras I'd installed captured shadows lurking near the property at odd hours. Broken garden lights, damaged sprinklers, all deliberate. The financial toll was crushing. Daily fines added up faster than I could pay. My lawyer's bills soared. Repairs to vandalism drained my savings. even the small fire department donations I made to help with their equipment started to dry up because of the whispers that I was in trouble. Emotionally, it was devastating. I had moments when I felt beaten down, powerless, like I was watching my sanctuary crumble piece by piece. I questioned whether it was worth it to keep fighting. But then, I thought about Andrea, about all those years of service, about the families who depended on our fire safety drills, about the community we could still save. Linda's arrogance seemed endless. She acted as if she were untouchable, like the HOA board was her kingdom and she its queen. Her emails became more aggressive, more threatening, dripping with disdain. She hinted at personal ruin, promising to make an example of me. That's when I discovered the bigger picture. This wasn't just about a grill or smoke or property rules, it was about money. Big money. I learned that Linda and her cronies were secretly negotiating a lucrative development deal, a commercial complex slated to replace several residential lots, including mine. The HOA rules were being weaponized to clear out problematic homeowners and speed up zoning changes. They were using me as a test case. If they could force me out, others would follow without resistance. I realized the entire neighborhood was under threat. My fight was no longer just personal. It was about protecting everything we had built. Despite the mounting pressure, I found strength in unexpected places. Neighbors who had suffered in silence began reaching out privately, sharing their own stories of intimidation and harassment. Some offered quiet support. Others contributed security footage or legal advice. My former colleagues from the fire department volunteered to help monitor the situation. With their help, I resolved not to back down. I documented every threat, every interaction, every violation notice. I recorded phone calls and saved emails. I logged every incident, no matter how small. I turned my pain into evidence, because when you are fighting a hidden enemy with vast resources and no conscience, your only weapon is proof. Concrete, undeniable proof, and I was ready to wield it. It was late one rainy evening when I first caught a real break, a breakthrough that changed everything. I had spent hours sifting through emails, HOA meeting minutes, and financial statements I'd managed to get my hands on through a neighbor who worked as a bookkeeper. She was quiet, nervous, but when she saw how serious I was, she slipped me copies of documents that were never meant to see the light of day. At first, the numbers looked like typical HOA finances, dues, maintenance, some community events. But hidden in the fine print were transfers labeled consulting fees and legal services to companies I'd never heard of. The amounts were staggering, tens of thousands of dollars every month. With the help of my former colleague, Anna, a forensic accountant with a sharp eye, we traced those payments. They led directly to a private law firm known for aggressive property foreclosures. The same firm that had been filing baseless lawsuits against me and others in the neighborhood. Anna's voice was steady but firm when she said, "Mark, this isn't just corruption, it's organized fraud. They're funneling HOA funds to companies that intimidate residents into selling their homes at a loss." That revelation changed everything. At the same time, a tech-savvy neighbor named Carlos came forward. He had installed new security cameras on his property after a break-in attempt. Among the footage, we found disturbing scenes. Linda meeting privately with unknown men late at night, passing thick envelopes back and forth in the shadows. Carlos also helped me recover deleted audio recordings from community center meetings. One clip caught Linda boasting about cleaning out the old guard and making the neighborhood more profitable. Her voice was cold and calculating. As we pieced it together, the picture became clear. Linda was leading a criminal enterprise, using the HOA as a front to pressure longtime homeowners into selling their properties cheap for a massive development project. And I wasn't the only victim. I contacted a few neighbors who had been forced out in the past year. One was Evelyn, a retired schoolteacher whose home was suddenly declared unsafe after a suspicious structural inspection, forcing her to sell. Another was Tim, a small business owner whose storefront lease mysteriously fell through after Linda's board pressured the landlord. Evelyn and Tim joined our cause, sharing their stories, their documents, their pain. Their voices gave weight and numbers to our fight. Then came Jake, the young firefighter I'd mentored. He had connections within the city fire department and knew several officials who owed him favors. Jake arranged for me to meet with Captain Hernandez, who was stunned by the false complaints lodged against me and others. He promised to look into the misuse of city resources and put a stop to the harassment. My family also stepped in. My daughter, Rachel, a lawyer in town, offered to help pro bono. She had a sharp mind for civil rights and had been quietly outraged by the injustice unfolding in our neighborhood. Together, we formed a network. Each person brought unique skills, insights, and courage. Anna's forensic accounting exposed the money trail. Carlos's tech savvy turned surveillance footage into irrefutable evidence. Rachel's legal expertise helped craft formal complaints and organized meetings with city officials. Evelyn and Tim's stories galvanized the community, even neighbors who had stayed silent began speaking out when they saw our momentum. We became more than a scattered group. We were a force. We called it the Justice Coalition. Our first order of business was documentation. We created a secure online database where every email, photo, recording, and financial statement was uploaded, time-stamped, and cross-referenced. This wasn't just a mess of files, it was a weapon. Forged from truth. Rachel insisted on making sure our evidence was airtight. She said, "If we want to take down Linda and her board, we need to play by the rules, but play smart. The smallest mistake could give them an opening." I spent hours reviewing everything, reliving the pain and frustration. But now there was purpose behind the struggle, a light at the end of the tunnel. Our coalition also began public outreach. We held community meetings in local churches and parks, inviting neighbors to share their stories and offer support. Many were afraid at first, worried about retaliation. But as trust grew, so did the numbers. Our message was simple: you are not alone. And together, we are stronger than any bully with a clipboard. One night, during a gathering in the community center basement, Linda unexpectedly appeared, trying to intimidate us with a false cease and desist letter. Instead of silence, the room erupted in chants of support for me and the coalition. That moment, more than any court document or email trail, showed me the true power of unity. The coalition kept growing. An unexpected ally came from within the HOA board itself. The secretary, a quiet man in his late 40s, disillusioned by Linda's greed and tactics. He began secretly providing us with internal emails and meeting recordings, revealing plans to escalate harassment against homeowners who refused to sell. His courage was a turning point. The evidence he gave us exposed meetings where Linda and the board discussed falsifying documents to justify fines and eviction notices. He even recorded Linda ordering a hired investigator to follow me and gather personal information. With all this, we compiled a massive dossier ready to present to the city council, the police department, and if necessary, the courts. More we uncovered, the clearer it became that this was no small HOA dispute. It was a conspiracy, and it was about to unravel. But as we prepared for our biggest move, I still carried a quiet fear. Could we really take on a woman with deep pockets, political connections, and a ruthless will? The answer, I realized, wasn't just in the documents or the evidence. It was in the people standing beside me. Because no matter how powerful the enemy, justice is strongest when it's backed by truth, courage, and community. And that's exactly what we had now. The night of the HOA's annual meeting arrived with an electric tension that crackled through the air like static before a storm. The community center was packed, every chair filled, aisles crowded with neighbors whispering in hushed anticipation. This was the moment, the culmination of months of tireless investigation, endless phone calls, and heart-wrenching setbacks. Linda Cranston sat at the head of the long conference table, her posture rigid and eyes cold as steel. Her platinum hair was pulled back tighter than usual, lips pressed into a thin, forced smile. The room hummed with an uneasy silence as the board members shuffled papers and whispered among themselves, clearly uneasy in the charged atmosphere. I stood near the front, flanked by Rachel, Anna, Carlos, Derek, Evelyn, Tim, and Jake, each one of them a pillar in this fight, their faces resolute with determination. We had rehearsed the order of presentation countless times, but no script could have prepared me for the magnitude of this moment. Linda began the meeting with a rehearsed speech, her voice dripping with false civility. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for gathering tonight. I want to address the ongoing concerns regarding the recent allegations against the HOA board and myself personally. These claims are baseless and malicious attempts to undermine the stability of our community. Her eyes locked on me, the unspoken challenge hanging heavy in the air. As she spoke, I felt a calm settle over me, a clarity born from the months of struggle and preparation. When it was my turn, I stepped forward, voice steady but filled with conviction. Neighbors, this isn't just about me or one backyard grill. This is about accountability, about transparency, about protecting our homes, our memories, and the future of Brookridge Estates. One by one, we began to present the evidence, each piece a hammer blow to Linda's fortress of deception. Anna displayed the forensic accounting reports, highlighting the suspicious transfers of HOA funds to law firms and consultants linked directly to legal harassment campaigns against residents. She explained the patterns of fraud with precise, accessible language that left no room for doubt. Carlos projected the security footage onto a large screen, crystal clear videos of Linda meeting under the cover of darkness with unknown associates, exchanging envelopes that could only be described as payoffs. The crowd murmured, shocked by the visual proof. Rachel followed with the legal documents, laying out the timeline of false complaints, baseless citations, and the board's plans to force homeowners into selling at a loss. Her voice never wavered as she dismantled Linda's claims of community order and exposed the ruthless greed behind it. Derek took the floor next, revealing internal emails and recordings in which Linda ordered harassment tactics and encouraged falsification of documents. His testimony was brave, and I saw nods of approval from neighbors who finally understood the full scope of the abuse. Then came the most powerful moment. Evelyn, the retired teacher, stepped forward. She shared her story of being forced out after a fabricated safety inspection threatened her home. Tim spoke next, detailing how his business was sabotaged, all orchestrated by the board. Their heartfelt testimonies turned the fight from an abstract battle into real, human suffering. Linda's facade began to crack. She tried to interrupt, to dismiss the evidence, but the room no longer belonged to her. When she finally spoke, her voice shook, barely masking panic. This is slander. These documents are forged. These videos are doctored. You're all being misled by a vendetta. Her desperate claims only fueled the crowd's resolve. Then in a moment none of us could have predicted, Linda lost control. Her voice rose, face flushing bright red as she ranted about traitors and conspirators. She shouted accusations at board members who had turned on her, revealing her true colors in a spectacular unraveling. I built this community. I made it safe. And you will pay for trying to destroy me. Her tirade ended with her slamming her fists on the table, drawing gasps from the audience. At that exact moment, city police officers, quietly stationed at the back, stepped forward. They read Linda her rights, detailing charges of embezzlement, fraud, and abuse of power. The stunned crowd watched in silence as she was led away in handcuffs, the platinum hair disheveled. The queen dethroned. Justice had arrived. The meeting ended with a standing ovation. Not for me or my team, but for truth and for the community. Reclaiming its voice. Months later, a judge issued a permanent injunction dissolving the corrupt HOA board. The fraudulent fines and liens were overturned, and a new, transparent governing committee was elected, one committed to openness and fairness. The community slowly began to heal. My neighbors returned to their porches. Neighbors once again exchanged greetings, and the sounds of children playing echoed through the streets. The fire safety BBQs resumed, louder and more joyful than ever. A symbol of resilience. As I stood beneath the forever tree, smelling the familiar smoke from the grill, I knew the fight was far from over, but this battle was won. Linda Cranston's reign of terror was over, and in its place rose a stronger, united Brookridge Estates, because when you stand firm, armed with truth and allies, even the most powerful bullies can be brought down. And that night, justice burned brighter than any flame on my grill. In the weeks following Linda Cranston's public arrest, the ripple effects throughout Brookridge Estates were profound and far-reaching. The once tense streets softened as the shadow of fear lifted from every porch and backyard. It was as if a heavy fog had finally cleared, revealing the true colors of a community longing to heal. The former HOA board members, all complicit in Linda's schemes, faced swift and severe consequences. Criminal charges ranged from embezzlement and fraud to intimidation and harassment. The courtroom became a stage for a drama that captivated the town, a tale of greed, betrayal, and eventual justice. The media covered the trial extensively, exposing the depths of the corruption that had threatened so many lives and livelihoods. Linda's public humiliation was complete. From her pristine appearance and haughty demeanor, she transformed into a figure of disgrace, her arrogant smirk replaced with shame and silence. The judge sentenced her to a lengthy prison term, imposed massive restitution payments, and barred her from ever holding public or community office again. The fall of someone who once wielded absolute power became a powerful lesson for anyone who might consider abusing trust. With the corrupt board dissolved, the community elected a new governing body, one founded on principles of transparency, accountability, and respect for individual rights. Meetings became open forums where residents could voice concerns without fear of retribution. The new board implemented reforms that restored the freedom to enjoy personal property without unreasonable restrictions. One of the first acts was to reverse all the unjust fines and liens imposed during Linda's tenure. My backyard grill, once the center of contention, became a symbol of triumph, a monument to resilience against tyranny. The HOA even organized neighborhood events celebrating community, inviting fire safety officials to collaborate on educational programs that honored the spirit of service Andrea and I had cherished. More than that, the community rediscovered trust. Neighbors who had grown distant began to reconnect. Potlucks, block parties, and weekend gatherings flourished. Stories once shared in whispers were now spoken aloud, binding people together through shared experience and renewed hope. The physical scars on my property, graffiti, damaged plants, broken lights were gradually repaired, but the emotional wounds required more care. Therapy sessions helped me process the trauma of being targeted and isolated. Yet, amid those sessions, I felt a growing strength, an affirmation that fighting for what's right was not only necessary but deeply healing. Jake and other volunteers expanded the fire safety drills, turning the backyard into a hub of community empowerment. We raised funds for new equipment and held workshops, teaching neighbors how to protect their homes and families, not just from fire, but from any form of intimidation or injustice. This ordeal transformed my purpose. What started as a personal fight became a mission to educate and protect communities from similar abuses of power. I began speaking at city council meetings, sharing our story as a cautionary tale and a beacon of hope. Local groups invited me to discuss the importance of vigilance, documentation, and unity when facing corrupt governance. The legacy of the fight became tangible. One spring, the neighborhood planted a justice garden beneath the old oak tree, where Andrea and I had once planted flowers together. It was a living reminder of resilience, community, and the power of standing firm against oppression. Every year, residents gather there to celebrate not just survival but renewal. Looking back, the ordeal reshaped our community's values. We now place a premium on transparency and empathy. HOA rules were rewritten with input from all residents, focusing on fostering harmony rather than control. New policies guarantee that no single person or faction can wield unchecked power again. Most importantly, the fight restored our dignity. For me, it reaffirmed that no matter how deep the struggle, standing up to injustice, even when it feels impossible, can bring about change. Andrea's memory was never just about a grill or a yard. It was about courage, love, and perseverance. Protecting that legacy became the light guiding me through the darkest times. Our community story became a beacon to others, a powerful example of how truth, courage, and solidarity can dismantle even the most entrenched systems of abuse. And that is the true victory, not just over a corrupt HOA, but over fear itself. Because when a community stands together, no bully, no tyrant, no Karen can silence the voice of justice for long. Brookridge Estates is stronger now, not despite the fight, but because of it. And that strength will endure for generations to come. Looking back on everything that happened, the threats, the lies, the endless battles, I can finally breathe. It was not an easy road. Every day brought new challenges, and there were times I felt completely alone, overwhelmed by the weight of fighting an enemy who seemed invincible. But now, standing here in a neighborhood reborn from the ashes of corruption, I feel a hard-won peace. Linda Cranston's downfall showed me that even the most powerful people can be held accountable. It proved that documentation, persistence, and unity are the strongest weapons against injustice. More than that, it reminded me how essential it is to protect the places and memories that make a house a home. This fight was never just about a grill or a yard. It was about standing up for respect, fairness, and dignity. The community continues to thrive. New leadership listens, neighbors support one another, and trust has begun to heal wounds that once felt permanent. Yet, vigilance remains necessary. Evil doesn't always announce itself openly, and those who seek control will always look for cracks to exploit. That is why your stories matter. Your experiences shed light on injustice and empower others to stand up, to speak out, and to fight for what is right. So please, comment below and share any HOA horror stories you have faced. Whether it is a small nuisance or a large battle, your voice is powerful. Together, we can build a community of strength and support where no bully, no corrupt official, and no Karen can silence us. And who knows? Maybe your struggle, your courage, your victory will be the next incredible story I share with the world, proving, once again, that even against the greatest odds, standing your ground can change everything. Thank you for listening, and remember, justice begins when we refuse to stay silent.